Yes, it's just preparing the stream. We are all set. Perfect. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to yet another session from Cyber Preserve. And today it's going to be a live session as always. And today we have a wonderful guest with us today. And before I can introduce her, I have my wonderful co-host, Saman Fatima, with me. And today we are going to go live with the most wonderful and lively and fearless Alyssa Miller. So many of you know Alyssa by different name, like basically by different perspectives. Some of you call her as hacker, security advocate, and whatnot. But she and her in herself is a champion in the cybersecurity industry, representing women across the globe. She's currently serving as a BISO in S&P Global Ratings, and today she's with us to discuss her cybersecurity journey and yes, her upcoming book, Cybersecurity Career Guide. Welcome, Alyssa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I apparently you didn't feel like I wore enough blush, so with that intro, you made me blush more. But thank you. I really appreciate it. That was wonderful.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for joining us today. We know the world is currently fighting with Log4j vulnerability, and I know it's very critical right now. So, yes, before wasting any time further, let's start with our session. So, Alyssa, many of the women across the globe, they are watching you, they see you in various sessions in person and live. And your journey, like when we see your profile, when we see you talking, it's look like you carry so much experience, you carry so much energy, and definitely each one of us, we are somewhere in the middle of our cybersecurity career, or many of the women or audience who is watching us live, they might be thinking to like, should I switch my career to cybersecurity? How do I do that? Will it be tough or whatnot? So we would be happy to know your journey, like how did you start, and what was that force and motivation which brought you here, and now you are this fearless woman today.
I don't know that I'm fearless, but if I put off that energy, hey, I'm good with that. But yeah, so I'll give you the long form of my journey because I think we have some time. Um, but yeah, the story as I tell it, my story is that, I've been a hacker all my life. So I was that little kid, like, I like to take apart, my toys, take apart my family's electronics, which wasn't always to, my parents' satisfaction. They didn't always feel too comfortable about me doing that. And so, that's that hacker mindset of just wanting to understand how technology works, figure it out, maybe play with it, make it work a little different, right? And I mean, I've been doing that since I was a little kid. Um, but when I was 12, I saved up money and went and bought my first computer. And this was back before computers were kind of ubiquitous in most households. I mean, most people did not have a computer at home. Most people were not necessarily using computers even at work. Um, and so, it was really kind of a weird thing that a 12-year-old would save up her money and go to Best Buy here in the US and buy a computer for herself of all things. What most 12-year-olds, if they had $1,000 to spend back then, would have spent it very differently. But so in any event, I got into a few things there. This was pre-internet, or at least pre-public access to the internet, and so I was using a service called Prodigy, and that's where I kind of actually hacked my. Those were my first hacks. Was in Prodigy. Um, the internet came along. I got involved in some hacker groups on IRC. Now, there's something that would be interesting how many people even remember IRC. I'm really dating myself in this conversation. But so anyway, all of that. Like I did all that stuff, and then Lisa recognizes it. Yay! Somebody knows IRC. Um, but I never saw security being like a career. I never thought of those skills as something I could ever make a career out of. In fact, I went to the university for pre-med, but it was, 3 semesters of college level chemistry. I realized I did not want to be in pre-med anymore. At this point, I had already taught myself programming and, knew how to program in a couple different languages. I knew uh, basic. I knew a little bit of C. Um, and so I had to find a new major, and I went looking through the course catalog at the college, and I found this thing called computer science. Like, okay, well that's programming. I know how to do that. That'll be an easy way to get through my degree, right? That'll be simple. Yeah, that was not well. It was not simple, but I got through. And so I started actually while I was still in school. I got started in my first, salaried position, so my first kind of adult job, if you will, as a programmer for a financial services company. And I worked there for 9 years developing on their electronic payment system. And after about 9 years, a manager from the information security team came to me and she asked if I wanted to join her security test team, which was basically their pen testing team. And yeah, I didn't know anything about pen testing really. And I told her that, and she's like, well, you're smart, you'll figure it out. That's why I'm asking you, which is a really wonderful thing to hear, by the way. It's very uplifting to have someone say that to you, that, you know, I know that you don't have all the skills, or the experience for this, but you're smart and I know you can figure it out. And I value you because you have that. And so that was where my cybersecurity career started. And since that time, it's really it's kind of taken off. So I spent another 6 years working with that company. So I was there 15 years, decided, all right, I've seen enough of what this company is about. I want to see what the rest of the world is doing. And I got into consulting. And, my background as a developer meant that I was always fairly focused on application security. And so that carried on into a couple different roles within consulting, but it started more with like pen test consulting, and then sort of just kept elevating. And I took a job where I was leading the program services practice for this consulting company, which meant that now I was working with security leaders on how do you build an AppSec program, right? Not just, hey, let's go assess your app, but how do you build a program to make sure your apps are secure? And then that fed into I did some work at a reseller for a while. I did some work at a vendor for a while. I worked at Sneak. For those of you that have heard of Sneak, I know Cyber Preserve was doing some stuff with Sneak recently. And then through my network, I did an event for Sneak. We were hosting a CISO roundtable, and someone from my network was on that roundtable with me, and neither of us knew the other was going to be there. And she joined, and she got in touch with me outside of that. We started talking, and I found out that S&P, where she was working at the time, had this role, this BSO role. And so I started asking her about it, and one thing led to another. She connected me with a hiring manager, and that's how I ended up where I am now. So, like I said, really long story. Sorry, but yeah, it's been a wild ride because I've seen a lot of different things. I've worked in organizations with consulting. I've worked across various levels of from everywhere from the engineers all the way up to the executives. And I've seen a lot of different industries. I mean, I've had a lot of focus in healthcare. I've had a lot of focus, of course, in financial services. I seem to keep coming back to that one. But education, you name it, you name the industry, and I've probably worked with people in it at some point.
That's awesome. Actually, this made me more curious because when we join cyber is not just one little area. It's so diverse. We have so many areas and so many industries that we are working with. Was this transition easy for you? Like while you were working for different industries and different role, like for example, you transitioned from developer to consultant and then becoming a security advocate. So was this transition easy? Like what was your personal experience in these transitions?
Sure. So, I mean, the first one is always the hardest, right? And it's hard for anybody trying to get into cybersecurity. Like, how do I get there? Right?
Yeah.
I had the fortune or the privilege that I wasn't actually looking to get into cybersecurity. It kind of found me, right? But that was still, I mean, that was the hardest one because, I mean, for me as a developer, and we're talking back in the 90s and early 2000s, like information security at that time, they were the enemy, they were the ones. I didn't like working with information security. So now I'm going to join information security. It was kind of, it was a weird experience for sure. So that alone was kind of a rough transition. And then, yeah, it was going away from a space where I felt like I was really strong. I knew, a senior, I was a team lead or whatever. I don't remember what the title was at the time for the development org that I was in. And now I'm coming into cybersecurity, and I don't, I'm joining a team of people who have been doing this longer than I have because I hadn't been doing it at all yet. Um, and part of that was I actually came into that team as a team lead. There were a number of amazing engineers on that team, but they didn't really have interest, I guess, in being in a leadership role. And so I was a little daunting too, right? I mean, to come in as like, you're the senior member, but you've never done this work before, and you've got this really experienced team with all these amazing individuals that you're going to lead. So that was a big shift, right? I mean, that was terrifying. But the nice thing with cybersecurity after that is that it is easy to pivot from one discipline to another. And these are conversations I have with folks when they're looking at how to start their cybersecurity career, and I ask them, what are you interested in? What part of cybersecurity do you want to be in? And sometimes people are very unsure, and they're worried that they're going to make the wrong choice. And so what I try to stress is, look, try something out. Find a way to get in, whatever feels like it interests you now, try it out. And if you work in it for a year or two and you're like, this just isn't the thing for me, it is actually pretty easy to pivot once you're in the industry. The big heavy lift right now for most people is just getting over that hump of how do I get into cybersecurity. After that, yeah, you have to keep learning. I mean, if you're not interested in constantly learning new stuff, don't enter cybersecurity because technology is going to keep evolving, and it feels like it just keeps evolving faster and faster and faster. So there's always stuff out there to learn, but so accept that's just part of the job anyway. And so then, pivoting from one to the next just means you take a little bit different focus. You maybe, have to learn some new skills, but most of the concepts, the basic concepts, kind of touch in all the different disciplines. It's just what part of it are you really focused on based on that discipline you're in?
That is so true. I think this is something I've personally felt most of the recruiters, they are missing out on this because when you apply for different jobs, one of the most common question which comes is, oh, your past experience is this. And why are you applying for not this job? And sometimes the thing in my mind is like, oh my God, like we are part of cybersecurity. It's okay. We are touching a small area because we are working continuously in that area, but it doesn't mean we are not familiar with the other areas. And this is, I think, something everybody takes it as a challenge in the industry when to transition. And similarly, I have one more thing in my mind, like what are the challenges you face? Like you mentioned, handling a team, which is quite strong, and somebody's telling you that, oh my God, you're handling a strong team and you don't have a past experience on handling these kinds of teams. And this is sometimes which create anxiety, self-doubt, and we actually went into that mode of imposter syndrome, like continuously checking on us and thinking like, am I capable? Am I enough to know to do this job? So what's your, like, what is it something that you tell yourself when you are in those situations?
So there's a lot of things I tell myself because we all deal with it. It
Yes.
comes up all the time, that feeling of I'm inadequate or I don't belong here or whatever. And it's tough. And I think for women still, it's particularly tough because a lot of the industry still tells us that. You know, tech in general still suffers a lot of heavy male dominated, heavy male influenced attitudes. And so for women coming in, when you have that constant, like, everybody just assumes this is a guy's field. This is, and there's so many ways that even people who, you know, don't intentionally mean to, like, push women aside, just don't even realize that some of the things they say and do still do that. So it is tough coming in because every one of us is going to deal with that. So I mean, there's a few things I look at. You know, when I'm feeling that, I first of all just remind myself like everybody seems to feel like they got here by accident, right? Like I talk to so many people that just are like, yeah, my whole career was kind of an accident. I didn't really mean to get into security, or I didn't, this thing happened because I got a lucky break or whatever. Everybody gets lucky breaks, and I mean that. It's how you react to them and what you use them for and how you leverage them that really determines which route you're going to go. And and it's not just a one or the other. Usually it's you can handle it in a lot of different ways, and different people will do it differently. But those opportunities are there. It's not that like, oh, so that thing happened to me, that manager came to me, right? And she says, hey, I want you to join my cybersecurity team. Well, I looked at that for years and years and years, like, oh, that was just a lucky break. And it's like, well, no. She came to me because she and I had worked on a bunch of projects. She knew how I operated. She trusted me. And, I made the decision to take that leap. I took on that challenge of having to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So, I have to kind of remind myself sometimes that, like, yeah, I took that. Sure, it was a lucky break, but I took advantage of it. I took a chance. It was a big leap. I mean, it definitely was not, I did not say yes right away. It was, let me think about this and see if this is really something I want to do. So that's one thing. Another thing that we tend to do when we feel that way is we look at the things that we've done so far and we'll say, oh, well, that wasn't really me. So and so helped me, or they kind of made that happen. I was just along for the ride. And that's baloney too. Nobody gets anywhere in their career by themselves. So, that's another thing I have to remind myself. And I don't care how big or small the name is. I mean, we can think of some big names in the field, and I've actually had kind of informal conversations with some the names that people would definitely recognize. Um, and they all say the same thing too. They're like, yeah, I mean, I had help. I didn't do this all on my own. There's so many people who are a part of it, and that's the thing. We stand on each other's shoulders, and this is why it's so important that we lift each other up. Because if you're not helping lift somebody else up, you hold yourself back too. And so we rise, all the cliches. We rise together. Rising tides raise all ships. All those things. But it's the reality. Those cliches are cliches for a reason because they're true. And so when I look back on that, it's like, yeah, I have to remind myself, of course I had help. How else would I have gotten here? I wouldn't have learned the things I was going to learn. I mean, nobody, like, if you didn't have people to learn from, how would you learn? I mean, how would you get here? So, we all get help. We all get help along the way. And again, it's more about what did you do when you got that help? Did you accept it? Did you admit to yourself that, hey, this is someone who can help me grow and this is an area I can get better in? Or did you look at it and say, well, geez, I already know all of it. I don't need to learn from you. Thanks anyway. That latter one doesn't work, does it? You have to accept that help, and you got to be willing to accept it and to work with people, and that's how you grow. So yeah, it's those are the things that I have to remind myself most. Um, and then the last one. This is the hardest one, and I don't have a good. I've been searching for a way to try to coach people to do this. Acknowledging the validity of my accomplishments. Like, I look back at everything I've done and I can dismiss them in so many ways, right? Like I can look back at that first job when I told you I was a team lead. I ended up being the manager of that security test team. I was running vulnerability management for a Fortune 200 financial services company at the age of 30. But I never looked at it that way before until someone said that to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. That is kind of impressive, isn't it? And, it's that way all throughout my career. There's different things, and I think we all have those. And it's hard to tell somebody how do you, it's hard to give coaching on how to look at what you did objectively. And so the best thing I can do is suggest that talk to other people, share what you did, and ask them what they find most impressive about your past. And then be willing to believe them when they tell you, because that's the reality is we look at it and we lived it and we kind of will diminish it and whatnot, but people who see it from the outside can see it objectively and can say, hey, you know what, you really did something very impressive there.
That's very sweet and very kind of you to put that across, Alyssa. That you should realize that somebody has helped you and have that kind of notion to come up front and say that yes, I wasn't aware about this, and you being coming down and explaining me things or giving me that opportunity or helping me with things has really uplifted me in those sections. So what are your thoughts, Alyssa, about when we talk about women supporting women? So what are your thoughts regarding that?
I have lots of thoughts, so let me sort them out. And not all of them are good, quite honestly. I think it is very necessary. Again, because of how the industry is still very slanted toward, male-dominated attitudes and things like that. Just having those voices that we can talk to who experience the same thing. If you're a woman in tech, you're getting certain experiences that the men in tech just don't get, because being a man you don't suffer from that because you're the one that everybody's slanted toward. And so I think it is crucial that women are there to support each other and that we are lifting each other and learning from each other, because it provides a space where we feel a little more safe and we can really acknowledge that, okay, we all are experiencing the same thing. It's not just me. So, when in those cases where someone's trying to gaslight me and tell me that I'm just misperceiving it, no, I'm really not. This is actually happening. But it's also crucial from that representation standpoint. I mean, part of what makes it tough in tech as well, other than just the attitudes, is the fact you don't see a lot of other women here. And so it's getting a lot better, and social media actually helps with that. But, we do need that representation. I mean, it's lonely when you come into tech. It's lonely as you move into new spaces where there's less and less and less representation from women. It's important. Literally, this office I'm sitting in right now is owned by an organization that I'm a member of, and it's executive women. So across all industries and everything else, but for exactly that purpose, to provide a space where women can see other women who are doing the job. Because, quite honestly, I'll tell you, since getting into the executive world, it's really lonely. I thought it was lonely before. It's really lonely now because there's so few women at executive levels, and most of the time you're in these, you're in, whether it's an executive committee meeting or a board meeting, and you're looking around the room and it's so many men, and there's maybe one or two other women there. And I just spoke at a CISO conference last week, where it's the same thing, or earlier this week, sorry. And it was the same thing. I'm up there speaking, I'm looking out into the crowd, and it's all men. And I think there was one woman, and she ended up having to leave early. And I was like, no, come back. I need another woman in this room with me. And so, that's always a challenge for us. So that representation is important. Now, I said I don't have all good thoughts. The bad here is that because of that, and because we're all struggling to try to advance, there are times as women that we eat our own. There are women out there who will actually demean other women, because I don't know if I think it's because we get into a mode where we feel insecure because of all the things I just talked about. And when people feel insecure, there's this natural tendency to want to push other people down to kind of prop yourself up and feel a little better about yourself. It's honestly why I think guys treat women the way they do sometimes. Some of those, those men who are really toxic towards women, I think it's the same thing. They feel insecure about themselves, and they see an easy target that they can try to push down because they think they're going to push themselves up. The reality is, it's like pushing down on somebody who's in quicksand. The more you push them down, the more they're going to just pull you down as well. And, so this is back to that cliche of a rising tide raising all ships. It's not our human nature, but we really have to focus on lifting each other up and not seeing one person's success as competition or, a sign that we're not doing enough. It's, hey, you know what? I'm happy for them. And the more that they're successful, the more that's going to allow me to be successful. If someone sees a person like, I will drop a name. You see Katie Macias out there talking in front of Congress, and you're like, the natural reaction might be to feel bad about yourself, and then you want to feel bad about her, and you want to talk down about her. Like, no, be excited for her. She got to that space. They're listening to her. That means, wow, they're more willing to listen to women in tech now. Maybe there's an opportunity for me in the future to be a part of those conversations too, if that's where I want to go. And that's what I think we need to remember in those moments when you see someone and you're feeling, maybe, I don't know if it's jealousy or you're just, you're kind of feeling that natural, like, oh God, I really wish I was doing something like that. And you start looking for reasons why you deserve to be there more than them. Put that out of your head, be excited for them, and then look for reasons why you belong there too, and start trying to figure out how you can get there too.
Alyssa, I have a question for you. So having come up from through IT and then through the ranks of security, I think you've got a really unique perspective of climbing that corporate ladder, because you really took sort of all the traditional steps and then you took a couple of unconventional steps, going into the VSO versus CISO is the main one I think of. But for those women that are sort of in the middle of it, what's something that you think we could do, if you have ideas as an industry or just as a community of women supporting women, to help more women go from that middle level into that senior, that leadership, that executive? I know we at the CyberSN, we're having conversations with folks like SANS and other certification orgs about lowering that barrier to entry, scholarships, more affordable options, mentoring academies. Like, what is it going to take to get more women in the executive suite? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Step one, it's on women who are in that executive suite now.
Yeah.
To be blunt, there are too many women that get to an executive level and then kind of forget where they came from. And like, okay. And that's where that's where it scares me the most. That's where I see so much of the eating our own sort of thing, where, women make it into executive spaces and then they like push down other women. Like, what are you doing? Come on, you need to be doing the opposite. This is where you made it, so start pulling some other people up with you. And I mean, that's how I feel about my role. I mean, I've said this for years, that I have been the beneficiary of a lot of privilege that most women don't get to enjoy. And as a result of that, I'm going to use that privilege to help elevate other women up, because it's, that I feel like that's my duty. It's just the right thing to do. And so, step one, it is really on us to do more. So I think, think about like from a CyberSN perspective, I know that's not really your focus, right? I mean, your focus is helping people find jobs, and that, yes, that is important. But, as to how do we shape that, it's how do we start to have those conversations where we actually can really motivate women who are in executive roles today to try to help raise others. For me, I had an amazing mentor a number of years back who was in an executive role, and I reached out to her, and we had worked together a little bit anyway, and so it kind of formed organically. It wasn't just like I sought her out and said, well, I need a mentor. It was, no, we were working together, and I was like, hey, can we go have lunch sometime? And we talk, and it took off from there. And she was a huge help for me when I was looking at this particular role I'm in now. So I do think that that's important, how we connect people. But I really think the mentorship thing, this is what I'm starting to see that I'm really getting passionate about. I think mentorship has to be more organic. And it's hard to say, right? Because we're trying to be very intentional about how we help people out and how we help foster those mentoring relationships. And so we have different programs that are trying to, connect mentors and mentees. But where I've done some of that, I've been in those relationships too that were very structured and, and they came about very formally through a process. And that's good. There's value in that. I don't mean to diminish that, but the most powerful mentorships I've had are the ones where they sort of just formed organically. It was someone I met somehow, and this is where networking is so important. I think that's where, I got the most value is just those more informal conversations where, and it helped that we were working together and I could literally just, pop up an IM session and say, hey, what's going on with this? Or what do you think of this? Or those are the mentors I really love to have, are the ones where I can ask them in a moment's notice and say, hey, help me with this decision. I got a really tough thing going here or whatever, because we learn so much from each other that way. So I look for spaces like that. As we work with organizations like, you mentioned SANS and some others. Okay, great that we're doing the education side of it. I think that's really, really, really important. But I long for spaces even now. So I'm in this group, and the name of the organization, by the way, if anyone's interested, is called Chief. Now they're very focused on executives, so that you need to be in an executive or a near executive role to join. But I even expressed it to them. I'm like, look, you're doing a lot of career coaching, and so we have a lot of that available to us. But my point to them was, I want more practical knowledge. Like, I want to talk to people, like, how do you handle different situations as you get to these higher levels? Because that's a lot of the stuff that remains a mystery. I can train you all day long, but it's when you get into that role and now a lot of people, I know when I was, at a manager level or even an individual contributor level, I didn't even know what I didn't know, right? Like I didn't know what was going on up there, what I needed to know to get there. And I think a lot of that practicality is important. A lot of times I feel like we focus a lot on like personal branding and networking, and those are crucially important. Do not get me wrong. If anyone's paying attention to me, I've cultivated a pretty strong personal brand at this point, and I've got a great network. But the thing that does me the most good now, as far as growing my career, is really understanding, what's going on in those conversations that I'm not always a part of. And how do I need to go about reacting to that? So one of the things I tweeted recently, or maybe not so recently anymore, was, I said, if you're looking to get into, like, you want to get to executive roles, you want to continue to accelerate up the ladder, and you're in cybersecurity, stop focusing on cybersecurity skills. Start focusing on things like they teach in the MBA programs. In fact, I bought a great book because after I said it, somebody recommended this book to me. I think it's called like the 10-Minute MBA or something like that. I wish I knew the name of the book now. It's a great book, and I don't remember the title. Well done, Alyssa. Good job. But no, I mean, really understand that business side of things, because that's one of the things you don't realize. We're so focused on cybersecurity, but when you start getting those higher levels of leadership, you're going to be talking to people who are not in cybersecurity at all and don't really have interest in it. So you need to be able to talk to them in a way that's meaningful to them. And so understanding their conversations is really important. Their language, it's really important. What are their motivations? What are they focused on? Because if I want to be successful in cybersecurity, I need to get them to support me. And the best way to do that is to show them how I can help them to achieve what they're interested in. And what they're interested in is not fixing log4j in 45 100 apps or whatever you have. They're interested in, how do I make more money? How do I innovate? How do I grow the business? How do I make sure we're financially sound? All those other things that the rest of your executives are focused on. Remember, you got an executive suite of chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, chief technology officer, chief information officer, all of these titles. CISO is just one of those. So that's a lot of people that we have to talk to and influence.
That is so true, Alyssa. I think this is one of the major focus that I really find it like this is missing, because we often talk about how to get into cyber, various new areas which is coming up, but the major focus when we started off breaking barriers was also this, like, what about the women who are already in the industry and they want to scale up? And when they want to grow, it's not just about the technical skills, it's about those stressful situations that you might want to handle, and they are numerous. Like, if you recall them, there are so many situations where you just think like, what should be my reaction, and I'm in this situation suddenly, and how to go about this, and I need to fall back to someone now, someone who can just give me not the right answer, but actually just talk to me about this. Maybe they had a similar experience, or they can just talk about it, talk through it, because not everyone is going through exact same situation, but they're going to be very similar at different points in your leadership journey. And that's commendable that Lisa asked this question and you brought this discussion. It's extremely important. I really feel that, because at the end of the day, if you are just like, if you are sitting in a meeting and you're not able to express, or you're not able to bring that business perspective, it's challenging, to be honest, very challenging.
Yeah, very much so. And that actually reminds me of two other things, I really briefly, because I want to keep questions coming. But, one of the other things, Lisa, to your question specifically would be, even being prepared in like job conversations, because that's where women get held back a lot. I experienced it. I got passed over for a job, and to this day, I will absolutely maintain it was a discriminatory situation. And, so how do you deal with that? How do you, okay, you can go complain to your company's third-party ethics, hotline or whatever. Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of pitfalls in doing that. Maybe don't do that. EEOC can only help you in certain places. So how do you handle it when something like that happens? How do you handle it in a job negotiation where you encounter somebody who very clearly, or maybe not so clearly, is trying to hold you back? And how do you even recognize that, right? Even just what job do you choose to apply for? I think a lot of that coaching, how to handle job negotiations, how to handle even just looking through job descriptions and picking one that you're fit for. All of these conversations are so important. I mean, I think one of the best conversations I had as a part of this organization I'm in is, it just happened, I think, a week or two ago. There was a CEO on our meetup call who was talking about how she went to a board meeting, and the board was referring to her as young lady, and not in a complimentary sense. It was in a very demeaning sense, and they were being very clear that they didn't value her and they didn't trust in her, and it was very much related to her gender. And she had some really good ideas that she shared on how she dealt with that. And it was, it ultimately ended up with her just, very calmly and collectively saying, you know what, this meeting isn't productive anymore. I'm just going to leave. And she left the meeting, but didn't storm out, and just the whole thing about how she handled it was actually really impressive. And so I think, again, it's just all of that kind of thing where we can give actual real practical tips that you can go and take and use tomorrow. How to ask for, this is what I'm going to have to do because it's what I just did, how to ask for a promotion and how to get a promotion, right? Like it literally just went active 2 days ago for me, and I'm super excited. And it was a case where, I had to get my ducks in a row, and really, even that kind of coaching, I think where I can, and that's what I really focus on. I think it's important.
Yeah, I put a comment in the chat to an earlier point you made, and I imagine you get this too, where you want to help people that want to access or transition but they don't always come prepared for that conversation. And I think that preparing yourself for that, having some idea of what your interests are, the technologies, the specializations, you're going to get so much further with those mentoring and networking conversations. If you've done that for yourself first, it seems self-explanatory, but I'm always surprised how many people sort of are like, okay, how can you help me? And I'm like,
Yes.
help yourself and then come back to me and we'll talk about it.
So, yeah, and that does happen, right? I get people pop up at me in social media and say, can you help me get started in cybersecurity? Sure, yes, I would love to. So what area of cybersecurity are you interested in? Oh, I just want to learn it all. Okay, let's backtrack then. And let's talk a little bit more because, that obviously cybersecurity is immense. You're never going to learn it all. So let's figure out what actually interests you. And in fact, in my book, I've actually focused on very specific techniques and exercises people can do to try to figure that out. Just how do I self-analyze and figure out what interests me? And I think that that's critical to be able to do that and know where you want to go. Again, you don't have to make the right decision. You may decide a year or two in that this is not for me and then pivot. But just getting that foot in the door by understanding what it is you think you want to do, what interests you the most, and then pursuing that is very, very important.
That's really, I guess, bang on point. And just you mentioned about the book, and we wanted to hear more about that book because for everyone listening to, she will be having her book in 2022, and kudos to that cybersecurity career guide. And that's basically a self-help book, which would be a career changer for a lot of people, we're very sure of. But some bits and pieces we want to also know, like what the book excessively holds about the guide, or what it actually pens down, being your journey, being your experiences, or how that transforms. So just let us know more about it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, cybersecurity career guide should be released hopefully very early next year. It's my publisher is probably ready to kill me because we're like way behind where we were supposed to be, and it's kind of my fault. It's totally my fault. But it is available for pre-purchase now. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Manning.com. But the whole focus of the book is really trying to get people started in cybersecurity. Back in 2020, I did I did a lot of actually investigation into why is it that we're complaining we can't find talent, but I'm hearing from all these people who can't find jobs. It makes no sense, right? And so I did some surveys. I talked to recruiters and hiring managers. I did my own research into job descriptions on the internet, and I found a lot of interesting trends. And so that helped really inform the writing of this book. Like I said, there are very detailed, it starts with just what is cybersecurity, just actually understanding what cybersecurity even is, understanding what the roles are within cybersecurity, and then it progresses into understanding yourself, getting prepared for the job search, knowing getting over what I talked about before, how to find a job description that really matches up to you, how to take your experiences that are not cybersecurity or even tech related, and how do you leverage those as value adds when you're in the job hunt and you're having interviews. How do you sell that as something that's valuable? Focusing less on, hey, you need to follow these technical steps to get a job. No. Focus on, how do we overcome the actual barriers that exist? And that's the thing that I've not seen in any other book. There's a lot of cybersecurity books out there, how to start a career, but so many times they focus on, here's all the technical skills you need to learn. And no, this is focused really on how do you do your self-preparation? How do you get into the job hunt? How do you win a job? So, it covers prepping your resume, how do tailoring your resume to each job that you apply to. How do you handle the interview process? How do you handle it after you get a job? How do you, positioning yourself for the future? And I do address imposter syndrome as part of that. So that's really what this guide is for. It's really to help you get all the way from trying to start your career in cybersecurity, whether you're brand new to tech altogether or you're trying to pivot, but then really getting you through that whole process. So the last thing I'll say, and again, a little shameless self-promotion, if you do go to Manning.com and buy the book there, I think you just put an Amazon link. It's also on Manning.com. If you go to Manning, you can be a part of what they call their Electronic Access Program, or MEAP. And what that does is you can actually start reading the book now. You can read draft form of the book. Another way you can get there if you forget Manning.com is go to alyssa.link/book. It'll take you right to where you can buy my book. If you pre-purchase it, you can actually start reading it now. Now it's draft material, so it is, I promise you, it's going to change before it goes to print, because I can tell you already, like, we changed some chapter formats and whatever, we split some things up. But you can start reading it now, so you can actually already get the material, even though it hasn't been formally published yet. So that's one thing, unfortunately, you don't get if you buy it through some of the other outlets. I know it's available on Target and Amazon and a few others, but if you go to Manning or you go to alyssa.link/book, that'll take you right there, and then you can buy it from there, and you get that early access program as well, which is super exciting.
The book sounds really exciting, and I guess it would be really, really helpful for a lot of people to just quote it, as it would be a career changer for a lot of people who would be starting or who are already there, and would know the processes much better and could read it through and implement it in those ways. If there are something written, I guess people would know it much better and implement it in great ways. And really, really, I wish you good luck for that release. All of us are really happy for that book and really excited for its coming in 2022.
Yeah.
We're gonna buy this, Alyssa, and we're going to send you photos. Definitely. I think it's very much needed. Like, we were really curious about that perspective, because that's the major challenge. Like, knowledge is something you gain, skills is something you gain, but what to do, how to get the job, and then how to sustain that job. Like, life doesn't end there. Like, I got the job and the success ends there for cyber. No, you just started off with a stepping stone, and now you need to move ahead. So I think that book is going to bring that change for each one of us and the aspiring people in the industry. So thank you so much for sharing all the details with us, and specifically the Manning link. I've added that to the audience who's watching this live. I've added that to the description of this video. And we have 10 minutes left. So now anybody from the audience which has joined us today, like Megan, Abhilasha, Shruti, Lisa, Muskan, Shruti Kamath, and Sophia. If you have any questions, any last words for Alyssa, we'll be happy to open the stage for you now. Please go ahead.
Silence befell the room.
Hi, Alyssa. I'm Shruti Rupa. I just wrote it in the chat. Like, I loved your session. It was really wonderful to hear from you and all the experiences that you shared. Like, we could actually relate with whatever you said, and I really am excited to read your book.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I mean, that means more to me than anything, to hear that, something I did or said was helpful to someone else. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti. So to be honest, Alyssa, before we conclude this particular session, we really learned a lot, because there are so many sessions where we go and we talk, but there are very few where we are actually taking some key value lessons, and which actually forces us to think like, now we have to think in this direction, or our focus and perspective actually changes, because many of us are part of multiple women communities. We have experienced various things, and one of the important lessons is, like, are we really helping each other, or as part of community, are we really bringing those changes which not only help individuals who are starting their career, but somewhere in the middle, somewhere at the leadership point. So we really should be thinking about not just sessions, but we should be thinking about those kinds of life case studies. I think this is really important. Like we have one in Harvard and in business schools, I think we can bring those live sessions in our communities and just discuss those case studies. Like, this happened today, somebody is going to bring those case studies. And I think we should have more of these live lessons, and we want more of you in our communities and more women like you, Alyssa, in those communities, because that's how change is going to come, because it's the
Yeah.
only constant and it has to come.
And there are a lot of great women out there doing work along these lines, right? I mean, and that's the thing, is how do we elevate those voices and get them heard, so that, you know, those who can bring, you know, some of that, because I mean, you're right. I mean, I have noticed there's kind of that, there's a lot of focus now, and great, I'm glad there's a lot of focus now on how to get more women into cybersecurity, but then it's kind of like, what comes next? You know, I feel like we kind of do forget about that a bit. You know, hopefully it's not a problem me mentioning another organization, but you know, right now I'm working with WESIS, Women in Cybersecurity. If I'm sure some of you are probably familiar, and we are launching a BISO affiliate. So that's going to be a
Wow,
WESIS affiliate focused on trying to help women
that's
get
amazing.
from, all right, maybe I'm individual contributor or I'm a manager. How do I get to that next level, get to director, VP, executive levels? You know, and using the BISO role, especially because it is fairly new and it really brings a new perspective to things, kind of leveraging that as the way to do it. So stand by. We just launched it. I don't think there's even a webpage on WESIS for it yet, but it will be coming. And you know, as we move forward with that, that is going to be tremendous. I think that's going to be one opportunity we're going to have to kind of influence, to, like you were saying, you know, just giving that, here's what comes next.
What can you
Alyssa, thank
expect?
you.
Yeah, Megan, go ahead.
Sorry, Asta. Alyssa, thank you so much for your talk, and I love the focus on what's next, kind of always thinking on the horizons. I was wondering if you ever look to balance, you know, being in cybersecurity versus being a woman in cybersecurity. Because I do a lot of work with different organizations, and sometimes I struggle with the concept of, I want to be identified as someone working in cybersecurity, but I don't always want it to be like women in cyber, if that makes sense what I'm saying. Like,
Yes.
I don't have a problem at all that I'm a woman in cyber, and I want to increase the number of women in cyber. I'm very passionate with that, but I don't always want it to be that it's like because of women in cyber, if what I'm saying makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like a
it's
title.
it's an adjective. It's not the noun. The noun is, I am a cybersecurity professional. Yeah, I happen to be female, or I happen to be, you know, Indian or black or whatever. All those are adjectives. They don't define who we are, and that is super important. And that is something that I'm very focused on. In fact, I just had this conversation with a conference organizer this past week, and that is that I personally, I won't even do, you know, a lot of these conferences now do like women in cyber panels and stuff like that. I refuse to do them now if the women on the panel aren't also doing technical talks or some type of talk, and I shouldn't say technical necessarily, but some type of talk at the conference. Why? Because otherwise we just get relegated to, we're the ones that are, you know, running with our DEI flags, the you know, diversity, equity, inclusion flags, and that's what our role is in cybersecurity. And yeah, we get kind of seen as, oh, it's that woman in cybersecurity instead of just that awesome person in cybersecurity. And so that's something that's become a passion of mine now. I can actually thank Leslie Carhart for that. She was the one who inspired me to do that. You know, and I think it's crucially important because, yeah, the women in cyber panels are important. It's important that we keep calling out the issues and keep trying to address it. But that shouldn't be the only thing. We need to see women out there giving talks on, you know, important topics besides just, you know, equity and inclusion and diversity.
And
So yeah, that is a really good point, Megan.
Yeah, and like with the executive, you know, call to action to the executive women, I do speaker support day in and day out. That's one of my main jobs, and the only way that that's going to change is if the speakers hold the line on that. I'm really happy to hear that you had that direct conversation with an organizer, because I think that is what it will take to say, look, I'm not going to be on your panel if it's a tokenism thing. You know, you
Yeah.
need to do a better job. And inclusion doesn't just mean you check the box, it means you really made it part of the bigger
Yeah.
ecosystem. I really love you saying that.
Yeah, and the other part of it, and I can't give details on this too much, I'm sorry, but you know, there's even that going into spaces that aren't necessarily, now I'm not saying put your safety at risk here, but going into spaces that might not be traditionally safe for women and being visible, again, giving, you know, technical information, not going in there to talk about DEI stuff, but actually going in there to just say, hey, you know what? I can play with the rest of you, so to speak. Here's proof I'm up here doing this. And then not even talk about it being a thing, right? Like I'm just here to talk cybersecurity. You know, who I am, what my identity is shouldn't matter. I'm just up here speaking cybersecurity. We're all here to learn about cybersecurity. There are those spaces where traditionally women haven't been, you know, maybe not physically unsafe, but they've, you know, not been safe from, like, you know, being harassed or other things. So where you have the strength and the ability to do that, and you can do it safely, you know, again, don't put, you know, your mental or your physical health and safety at risk, but you know, I think some of that's important too. And I mean, again, it's a privileged thing for me to say that because I am in a space now where I feel more empowered to do that. Um, but that's also why I'm going to keep doing that. And yeah, I mean, I have one coming up in particular where I'm going into a space that traditionally has not been safe for women. You know, and so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think that visibility is important, and we need to do that.
That's true. Thank you so much. Actually, we are just on time, just 1 minute left. And I think one of the last things that when I heard all of you on this is that diversity and inclusion is about bringing that, like, we have to accept, okay, accept in the sense it should be a normal change, accepting people from all the diversity, not making any bias. But at the end of the day, we just want to remove this. We want everybody to be considered equal. That's why we talk about diversity and inclusion, that at the end of the day, for the years to come, there would be a point when nobody would be considered based on their gender. Like, we're not like filtering people or filtering talent based on it. And this is what we want to do. We want to like promote DNA in such a manner so that at the end of the day, we are not promoting it 5 years down the lane or 10 years down the lane, and it becomes a normal thing. Like, we don't have to promote it at the end of the day, so that there is no specific gender we are promoting. It's not just about like women, we are promoting women for a specific reason. It's not like that. It's just we want to make it equal. We want that in a board there should be more women, in different jobs there should be more women, and in fact different genders, in fact LGBTQ, and every type of audience should be there, neurodiverse and whatnot, and everybody should be considered equal consideration for applying for a job or getting a promotion or be on board and just travel anywhere and be anywhere, so that we just not see one category of people. When we are speaking in a conference, we see everyone, and it seems like, wow, we have the whole, like, a representation of a whole world in one small place, and that's what we aim for. On this note, thank you so much, Alyssa, for joining us today and taking out your precious time. I really know you have been really, really busy. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to stop the stream now. Thank you so much.